Hey everyone, this is Sebas from Nextmv, and today we're going to be following along with this tutorial, which is CI/CD decision workflows with Nextmv and GitHub Actions. So in short, I'm going to be showing you how to set up a GitHub action that runs a decision pipeline so that we can push new code or deploy new code to Nextmv Cloud and create an acceptance test so that we can determine if a change is good or not for a decision model. Let's go ahead and get started by creating an account. So I already have a Nextmv account. I'll be skipping this step, but I'm going to pause for a second so that you can read this in case you don't. Cool. The next step is subscribing to a Nextmv plan, which I already am on a Nextmv plan. And you're going to be needing this because we do require pushing an application. So make sure that you're able to have a premium plan active for this tutorial. The third step is to install the Nextmv CLI, which you can do with any Python package manager of your choice. I'm going to use UV. And of course, I do already have Nextmv install, but I'm gonna make sure that I am on the latest version by upgrading this. Nothing to upgrade. Awesome. If this is the first time using the CLI, you do need to configure it. But if it's already configured, like in my case, I am good to go. Now, to test this, we are going to use a community app, and a community app is just an example application, and you can find many more community apps that cover different grounds of decision models. So we're going to be cloning the Python next route community app, and what this command does is it instantiates that sample Nextmv application here. You can see that it's a Python application, and this app, it resolves a vehicle routing problem. So you have your vehicles, you have your stops here, and you have your vehicles as well. So even though this is not in the tutorial, I'm still just gonna run this application locally to make sure that it works, which of course it does, but just to get a sense of what the output looks like. So nextmove local run create. Let me actually cd into the application itself. So nextmove local run create, and then my input is in input.json. And I'm going to go ahead and wait for the results and also tail the logs. So under the hood, what this will do is it's going to resolve the dependencies that I give it, and it's going to execute the app, and it's going to get the results of that run. So I can do as many runs as I want locally because they're just running on my computer. And this is completely open source. So we can see that this run succeeded. I can get my solution, my unplanned stops, and for each vehicle I can get the route of the vehicle. Cool. So moving on with creating your Nextmv Cloud application. So because we're going to be running this in the cloud, we do need to create a Nextmv Cloud application. Let me cd out of this. And for this case, we're just going to name it next route. So it's creating or getting that application. I already created my application. Awesome. And so we can take a look at our application, make sure that it's there. So here are my apps in my Nextmv console, and I can see the next route app is right here. Now we're going to push or deploy our Nextmv application. So we're going to take this executable code that's in my computer, and we're going to push it to Nextmv Cloud. And what this is telling us is to do it right outside the Python next route directory. So I am here, and I'm going to be pushing the app under /Python next route. And I'm going to be pushing it to the app whose name is next route. Now, normally when you push, you get prompted to create a version and create an instance. In this case, we use the version no flag because we're going to be doing those by hand. So there's no need to, for us right now to create a version, which is a tag for your executable code. You can think of a version as a Git tag, and then an instance uses a version under the hood. So an instance is more like the endpoint of your application. So it uses a version under the hood, which is tied to executable code. And you can also add configurations to your instance, which we're going to see in a second here. Awesome. So now if I go back to my app, I should be able to see that I have some latest push executable. Or we have a latest push executable, sorry. English is not my first language. All right, so we're gonna create an initial version and the instances. So the first step is to create a cloud version. So we're gonna name it just initial version. After I create this version, I can go here on the left, see versions. It was just created, cool. And now I'm gonna go ahead and create a couple of instances. So let me copy this here and just edit this because I don't need the $sign. So we're gonna create the instance called production linked to the initial version. And all of this is done, of course, on this Nextroute app that I created. And I'm also going to create the instance named or identified as staging, also linked to initial version. But the difference here is that we are setting on staging the option of the solve duration to be 20 seconds. So what we're basically simulating here, or the test that we want to make is what would happen if I run for longer? That's the main question that we want to solve in this acceptance test that we're going to run automatically. So now that I created my instances, I also need to create an input set. So to create an input set, there are various ways. In this case, we're going to start by just doing a run in my application. So it's telling us to run just outside Python Nextmv directory, so I'm in the right location. So I'm gonna run against staging. Just gonna go ahead and do that. And I already have my run. Awesome. Now I can do this a couple more times, maybe changing the input, playing around with it so that I have different input sets or different inputs in the input set. But for simplicity, we're just gonna move on. Now that I have my run, I'm going to create the input set. So let's take a look at this command. It's telling me that I want to create an input set on the Nextmv application. I'm going to identify it as input set 1, and then I'm going to use the instance staging. So what this is going to do is going to take the latest runs that were executed against staging, and it's going to gather those as the inputs of the input set. Cool. You can see that that run ID is right here. All right. Now that I have an input set, I'm going to create an acceptance test. So an acceptance test compares a candidate instance against a baseline instance, and you basically give it a metric or a business KPI that you want to measure. So in this case, let me copy this command and we can detail it further. So what we're saying here is, hey, the metric that I want to be comparing is the value, like the overall value of the objective. It's a direct comparison, and I am testing that the value should be less than or equal within a 5% tolerance. And the difference between what? So it's the difference between the objective function or the value of running against staging compared to running against production. So right now, both instances have the same version, but there's a difference because staging has a different option, right? So it runs for longer. And to do that, we're gonna be using the input set that we just created. And we're just gonna call it acceptance 1. Cool. So I created my acceptance test, and I can check it out. Yeah, like the next step is to check it out here in the console. It's acceptance 1. So right now it is running my my combination of options. So it completed. Let me just refresh it actually. Yep, so that looks better. And what this is telling me is that when you run against staging, your candidate value is indeed less than or equal than the baseline within a tolerance of 5%. And this makes sense because the vehicle routing solver, which is Nextroute, is heuristic. So if you let it run for longer, it's probably gonna find better solutions. But up until this point, we've done everything by hand, right? So the idea is that we're gonna set up a CI/CD decision workflow that does all of these steps just automatically. So for this, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a sample GitHub repository just in my personal account. So I'm gonna fast forward to when I have my GitHub repo created. All right, so I have a sample GitHub repo here, which I just created in my personal account. And I'm gonna go ahead and clone this repo to this location that we were working in. So git clone this. It's gonna be cloned into CI/CD Nextmv tutorial. Cool. So moving on with our tutorial, it's telling me to add the following content to a file named .github/workflows/nextmove.yml. So I'm gonna copy this whole file and I'm gonna create that here. So it's gonna be .github/workflows/nextmove.yml. And I already have my file here, and you can see that it's asking me to set up, or it's telling me, hey, you don't have a secret, which is the Nextmv API key, and that's quite important for this to work. So in the settings of your repo, I'm just gonna go to secrets and variables. I am gonna add a repo secret called Nextmv API key, and I'm gonna paste my Nextmv API key and press add secret. All right, so my repo has the Nextmv API key in there. If I reload this window, that warning should be gone. And what this acceptance test CI/CD decision workflow is going to do is it's going to get my latest code. When I push to a certain branch, let's check out the main branch of my repo, which is stable. So I'm gonna change this to stable. Then it's gonna set up Nextmv CLI using that API key. So this is an action officially maintained by Nextmove. Then it's going to push my application to a cloud app, right? Which in this case, it is Nextroute. But in this case, see how it will create a random version from this code, and it's going to update the instance, which is staging. So this is great. And then the working directory for this, I'm going to take this code and move it into my actual repo. So the code is ./Python Nextmove, right? That's where my Nextmove application lives. Then it's going to create a new acceptance test with the same command that we saw. The only difference here is that it's going to make a random ID from, well, not a random ID. It's going to make an acceptance test ID from the git commit, from the git SHA. So let's go ahead and add this changes. So I'm going to cd into my repo locally, and I'm gonna do git add all git commit CI CD example Sorry, this is the message. And then I'm going to go ahead and do git push. And this is the first time, so it's directly to stable, so to origin stable. Okay, so I pushed my changes to the stable branch. I'm just going to refresh. And we can see that the change is already here and something is happening, right? Something is happening here. So let's go check on the actions. So right now there's a CI/CD action running. It's the CI/CD example, which is the automatic creation of that acceptance test. So it installed the Nextmv CLI. Now it's pushing the new version and updating the staging instance. Then it's going to create a new acceptance test. So I'm going to fast forward to when it's done. Okay, so the workflow is done running, and you can see that it created an acceptance test for me automatically. And I can check out that acceptance test in the Nextmv console. We can see that it's this automatic one created here. And in this case, it's just the same test, so it doesn't tell me a whole lot. But the main idea is that when you are working with your code, you're introducing changes to your model, you're introducing a new constraint, changes to the objective function, something like that. So whenever you merge that code into the main or stable branch, then you can launch an acceptance test automatically so that you are tracking what are the changes that are happening to my model. And then the acceptance test, properly configured, is going to tell you, hey, based on the production instance or based on the main instance that you have configured, like this is what's probably going to happen if you merge those changes. When I am ready to deploy and I can run as many automated acceptance tests as I like, then it's as simple as going to my instances and then production, for example, I'm going to change it so that I'm not going to use initial version anymore, but we're going to use this automated version that was created by the CI/CD pipeline, right? So by doing this and pressing save, I officially changed the executable code and I officially deployed the new changes. So we have arrived at the end of the tutorial. I hope that this was very helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.